What's up, everyone? Welcome back to C&D Sports. We've got another divisional preview for you here in the NHL with the Metropolitan Division. We've already done the Pacific Division and Central Division, so if you haven't checked those out, check those out after you watch this one here. But the Metropolitan Division, it's an interesting division. I think there's some interesting names and takes that could be brought up here.
Yeah, so the way I look at this division is from 1 to 7, any one of these teams can make the playoffs. But at the same time, I feel in terms of the top end talent, it's probably the weakest division in the NHL, but
Yeah.
it's a deep division. Now, the one team that isn't in that 1 to 7 is Philadelphia. On top of that atrocious blue line, they're missing Ryan Ellis, who's arguably their best defenseman alongside Travis Sanheim, and they're missing their best forward, Sean Couturier. So they don't have much down the center beside Kevin Hayes. And like Scotty Lawton's good, but I don't know if you want him on that second line. Their wings, though, I like their wings with Farabee, Van Riemsdyk, Konechny, and Atkinson. That's good. Carter Hart and Felix Sandstrom. That's an interesting tandem, a
Still
young
leaves a bit
tandem.
it leaves a bit to be desired based on how inconsistent Carter Hart has been.
Yes. So I think this is going to be a tough season of making choices with John Tortorella in the room. You never know what to expect and what he's going to make of this team. So I don't want to count Philadelphia out, but considering the progression the teams ahead of them have made, I just don't see much hope for them. Now, the team at 7 is a team that could drop to 8 if things don't click, and that's the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're obviously a much better team with Johnny Gaudreau, but you can't underestimate the departure of Oliver Bjorkstrand. So that is an upgrade, yes. Of course, that's an upgrade, but they haven't upgraded as much as people are saying they have. The progression is more so going to be reliant on their young players like Kent Johnson and Cole Sillinger. They do have players that can eat quality minutes and guys like Boone Jenner, Andrew Peak, Vladislav Gavrikov. But again, this looks like a very thin roster to me and one that's looking to develop. And I look at this roster and even for the future, I don't know if they have winners. So I think that's something they're going to have to work on now and in the future if Columbus is ever going to make that jump in a very tough Metro division. And the final thought here is this team is essentially running it back with Johnny Gaudreau. So I don't see much
It
improvement.
it's a bit of it's obviously an upgrade when you get Goudreau, but I
Yeah.
mean when you compare that to the loss of Oliver Bjorkstrand, it's how much of an upgrade is that?
Yeah.
And but other than that, the team just looks just uninspiring. So not I yeah, Patrick Laine, is probably their next shiniest name on that list. And again, leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah, and maybe there is some chemistry between him and Goudreau, but I don't know how many wins that results in with the amounts of goals they end up scoring, however much that ends up being. Well, let's move on to 6, and that's where we have the New York Islanders. This is another interesting team. They don't lose much this offseason, so they're running it back. And this is a team where a lot of things went wrong for them last season. So you can look to that and expect improvement, but the league now, there's so much parity. So many teams are competitive. There are a lot of young players, and none of which are on the Islanders. So while these teams get better, the Islanders had a season off where they didn't. And I feel like that step is lost because outside of Romanov and Dobson, there isn't much here to expect greater from. So this is another team where they're deep, they're missing Barry Trotz, and that's going to be interesting. I'm intrigued to see what Lane Peterson does. If he goes an offensive route, they do have some depth, but if it's at the expense of their defense, I don't see much hope for this team to make a push for the playoffs. I do like Sorokin, though. I feel like he was a guy, he was a Vesna goalie. He just got outclassed by a Hart goalie in Shesterkin. So they do have a bright spot in their goaltending position between him and Varlamov, but this is a team that's deep, but I think it's finally catching up to them where they don't have those top end players to outclass other top end players.
Right.
Now we move on to New Jersey. That's who we have at 5. And this is where you start to see some of them, that Metro talent. I would expect Jack Hughes to have a healthy season. And if he does, you have a lot of scoring coming from whoever he ends up playing with. Nico Hischier, you can expect him to continue to develop as that two-way forward. Having those two down the middle provides two great top six lines, and I think they have the depth to fill it out with guys like Miles Wood, Eric Holla, Dawson Mercer, Andreas Janssen, Jesper Bohlquist. Alexander Holtz is going to be interesting to see what he does because you would expect him to fit into that lineup somewhere. So they have a lot of looks, and New Jersey is still a team that's figuring it out, I feel, but they have a lot of pieces to work with. So if they can't make that push into the playoffs this year, I would expect, will do so soon enough. And the teams ahead of them, especially in those veteran teams, if there are injuries or if things don't click for those teams, I think New Jersey will be that first team, along with the Islanders, to step into those playoff spots if they become available.
I
That
think
deep, oh, go ahead.
I think they've definitely done the work to graduate themselves from maybe the top tier of the teams that likely don't have a chance to now they're probably the bottom tier of they're a fringe wild card
Yes.
contender here. I think you can consider them a wild card contender now, just not necessarily the strongest wild card contender.
Yeah, that's a perfect place to put them in. But their defense is pretty good. You have Dougie Hamilton who can run that offense from the blue line for them. And they finally have guys around that offensive defenseman that fill out that blue line in John Marino, Damon Severson, Ryan Graves, Jonas Siegenthaler, and even Brendan Smith. These are all guys that can eat quality minutes. And in net, you have your choice between Blackwood, Vanacek, and don't forget Jonathan Bernier is still on this team and he's
Yeah.
looking to be back soon. I'm not sure exactly when. It may be season start, it may be a few weeks in. But if he can return to form, you have three pretty solid goalies to alternate between. So I expect a huge progressive season for the Devils, and I almost want to say playoffs, but I don't want to sleep on the teams we have ahead of them. At
No.
4, it's the Washington Capitals. Despite Backstrom being out until January and Wilson being out until December, it's the Washington Capitals. They bring in Connor Brown, and I feel that's a huge add for this team and their depth. I'm not sure where he'll fit. Will he be top 6? Will he be bottom 6? But that penalty kill is going to appreciate him. And you have the usual suspects. It's Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Oshie, now Mantha, who has been pretty solid for them. Their blue line's looking good. Of course, they're going to miss Justin Schultz a little bit, but I feel John Carlson's good enough to run that blue line. Dmitry Orlov can step up. He's been playing quality minutes for years now. And Eric Gustafsson's going to be an interesting add to see what he does on this blue line. He has some guys to work with, so maybe he can get to a form where he's putting up some good points as a secondary defensive scorer. It'll be interesting to see what the young guys in Connor McMichael and Hendrix Lapierre do, where they fit. They will have that opportunity because Carl Hagelin, I'm not sure where his health lies. And there's going to be a healthy competition for some spots in the top 9 at least between guys like Marcus Johansson, Connor Sherry, McMichael, Lapierre, and even a Nick Dowd. Besides that, this team is going to continue to sail their way through the season. Dylan Strom's also an interesting add. He's not going to replace Nicholas Backstrom, but he's in a position where he's going to want to prove himself as a offensive player, maybe not premier, maybe not elite, but he can play some quality minutes in the ozone, so don't sleep on him either. At 3, it's the Pittsburgh Penguins. I feel like this is a team you don't want to sleep on. It's not because of who they have, but it's because of what they're doing as an organization. They're still deep. They still have the top end players. Of course, they're aging and they're getting older, so it could be a team that drops off, especially when guys like Crosby, Malkin, and Letang tend to get injured. But they always eat their injuries and they find guys to make it work. And I expect this to be another season where that's the case because they have a team that can fill out that roster. They have Gensel, they have Raquel, they have Zucker, they have Russ, they have Kapanen, they have Drew O'Connor, and it'll be interesting to see the impact he makes. They have Brock McGinn, Teddy Bluger, Josh Archibald, Denton Heinen, Ryan Failing, Alex Nylander, who's another interesting piece to see what he does if he can finally make it work. But those are a lot of different options, and I see this team is very deep, and that's minus their blue line. Chris Letang, Brian Dumoulin, Jeff Petrie, Marcus Peterson, Ty Smith, Ian Ruda. I don't see a name that's weak on this team.
No,
These are all. Oh, go ahead.
I think the depth on this team, like you've mentioned it a lot here. Pittsburgh has been a team that I think, especially last year when push comes to shove and injuries hit, because you do have older guys, especially guys like Malkin. When injuries seem inevitable, they haven't had that depth to necessarily stay strong. They've always made the playoffs and been a contending team, but I think this is a team that now has the depth that they really won't miss too much of a step when these injuries come along, because again, Pittsburgh faces injuries year in and year out. So I don't think this year will be any different from that. But I do like their chances with all those depth names like Kapanen, like Bluger, McGinn, Archibald, like you mentioned. These are all guys that could step up in a pinch into this top nine and really make an impact.
Yeah. And their goaltending tandem in Yari and DeSmith, that's great.
Yeah.
I trust Ron Hextall. I feel like he's one of the more slept on GMs. And for Mike Sullivan, this is one of those years where if it doesn't work for Pittsburgh and they head into a tank, he's getting fired. And if they want to continue to contend, but he doesn't get the job done, he's fired. So really, for Mike Sullivan, if they want to keep him around, they've got to win. And they've got to do something in the playoffs. Otherwise, they're spinning their tires. And now with our top two teams, we're going to get into, teams that went through a lot of departures. But let's kick it off with our 2 spot. And that's Carolina. Carolina's Carolina. They're a team that knows what they're doing. They know who they are. But they're more looking to make that push in the playoffs and do something meaningful. They have the depth there. Bringing in Brent Burns is going to be interesting because that's their guy offensively. That's his power play. So I'm intrigued to see what he does because he's not really a playmaker. Now, the Hurricanes do have playmakers and guys like Aho and Kotkaniemi and Teravainen. They have their playmakers. So I'm intrigued to see that fit of, are they going to let Burns load it up from the point and take shots? How's that going to look? It's going to be interesting power play for them. But outside of that, like I think at this point, everybody knows who Carolina is. Now, although they've went through their departures, I mean, Trocheck's a huge loss. Niederreiter's a loss. Domi, not so much. Lorentz on their depth is a little bit of a loss. I feel like Burns should be an upgrade on D'Angelo outside of speed. Ian Cole's a bit of a loss, but I like the addition of Dylan Coughlin. So this is a team that was able to eat all their departures, bringing in Max Pacioretty. That's going to be great for the playoffs. I'm not sure how many games he's going to play this season, but come playoff time, you're going to get some quality minutes out of him. So they have a lot of options. I'd like to see him top 6, but it really depends on how good is Seth Jarvis going to be this year. We know what we're going to get in Aho, Teravainen, and Svechnikov and Natchez, but what are we going to get out of Jarvis this season? So that'll be an intriguing storyline. Their depth is phenomenal. Another wary spot for them is their goaltending. It's not so much the talent, it's the health. And that's New York's a great team, but had Carolina had healthy goaltending, the series would have been different. I'm not saying Carolina would have won, but it would have been a different series. They were down to the 3rd and even 4th string goalies. So Anderson and Ranta really, they don't have to step it up. They just have to stay healthy.
Right.
And that'll make the difference for Carolina this season. And obviously, at 1, we have the New York Rangers. And I feel like this is really the only team in the Metro that can be a juggernaut. It really depends on how well is this team going to support Shesterkin, because at the same time, this team could look like Winnipeg, a team that is over-reliant on their goalie and their players just flop. They have all the talent in the world when you look at guys like Panarin. They bring in Trocheck. That's a huge add because You do lose something defensively in Kopp. You do lose something offensively in Strome. Trocheck is that middle ground. So it's going to give them a different look at that second center spot. I'm interested to see what they do with Panarin. Do they move him up to play with Kreider and Zibanejad? Or will he find chemistry with Trocheck? So with Kravtsov coming in, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with the kid line. Will he replace somebody there, and will the Rangers move somebody up from that line, whether it be Lafreniere or Hedel? Sammy Blaze coming back. I'm not too sure what line he'll end up on. So with all the departures, it's going to be a different look in New York, but I still think once everything clicks and they're firing on all cylinders offensively, this team's going to be tough to stop. Defensively, I feel like they're very solid on the blue line. You have Adam Fox, you have Lindgren, you have Miller, you have Truba. Those are all great top four defensemen. I'm interested to see what Braden Schneider does this season. Hayek's all right. He's depth for them. So again, this is another season where the Rangers are going to be one among the elite. And I feel like because of how young they are, they should only get better. And I think they're poised to be a force in the Metro as long as everything can click and they can support Shesterkin. But if he goes down and they have to rely on Halak a little too much, that's going to be obviously very problematic. So really the Metro is all about health.
It is. There's a lot of aging teams, but then there's also, it's pretty promising in terms of just teams having young stars. Like you look at a team like New Jersey is probably a team that has the kind of that young depth that can come up. And then you look at teams like the Rangers with that young line there. You look at teams with like Carolina with pieces like Seth Jarvis. So I think there's a lot of interesting things, and it's a very diverse division.
Yes, very much so.
So with that, that'll do it for our Metro Division Power Ranking Season Preview video. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like the video, give it a like down below. Subscribe so you don't miss any of our other uploads. Make sure to check out our Central and Pacific Division videos. Those are already up. Comment down below what you think about our rankings and our thoughts on the Metro. What do you like? What do you don't like? Let us know in the comments below, and we will see you in the next video.
Peace.